Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BS in History. Oh my gosh, I'm realizing none of my lighting is good. I wasn't even looking at my camera. I'm Redgrave TV.
Oh, you're so vain.
You're supposed to say, and I'm Dan Jam Barker.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm Dan Jim Barker.
Welcome to BS in History, the only history podcast.
That is a claim that we've made.
I like to say that. That is what it is. That's the tagline. The only history podcast.
Dan Carlin would have something to say about that,
I guess
but that's fine.
Oh my gosh, Dan, I'm so excited because today we've got some fun history stories we're going to tell.
Yep.
And we're doing this live again. We're back to doing this live. I know we discussed this last episode, but this is something that you and I have done off stream, not live for the internet to see. And now we've got there's someone in the chat room talking to us. Tabbykins is live here.
What?
I know.
We have friends?
Well, we got one so far. So, yeah, really excited. I didn't plan an intro for this either. So, but
we can always just make one up.
I don't mean like a cadence intro. I mean, I didn't plan witty banter. I don't have anything to ask you.
Oh,
I don't have
because I was ready. We can improvise a song. It's really.
And Tabby's ready too. Yeah, no, we should come up with the official BS in History song or theme song.
That's a different.
Yeah. I'm really excited this week because you gave me the topic of elves, and I don't go first this week.
That's true.
But I have to say this at the top because I said it at the end last time, which is that you gave me a topic that I love and adore already, and I thought I knew so much about. But I've dug a little deeper, and I've shattered some of my own expectations.
I was going to say, how shattered is it? Because realistically, every time I think I know a topic, as soon as I dive in, there's just so much.
Yeah. Well, and also trying to keep it to, like, this is a history podcast, right? So, like, I could tell you all sorts of stories about elves, but, like, where did that come from? What was the history of that? How are they developed? So much to dive into. But if you haven't listened to this podcast before, if we haven't already kind of talked about it a little bit, Dan, will you go ahead and give us just a quick spiel on this podcast and what we're doing today?
Yeah. So everybody, welcome to BS in History. We got a simple little game we like to play here where Nathan and I are going to swap some stories. Real easy, real simple. Yeah. We each were given a pre-assigned subject, which if you watched last episode, you'd know all about. And we did our research and we put together 3 stories that we're going to share back and forth. Very educational. Mm-hmm. Really great thing that we're offering. It's a public service, really, except when you find out that one of those stories is a lie. One of those stories that we're going to share is completely fabricated, and it is up to us as the cunning detectives to sniff out which one of those tales is completely bunk. That's the game.
You're the first person who's ever called me a detective.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll probably be one of the last, too.
Because I will never be a detective. Oh, my gosh. At the end of each episode, we give each other our categories, giving ourselves just a mere 2 weeks this time to study up, learn our stories, write them down, and see if we can trick the other. We've discovered in the past, oftentimes, Dan, that truth is stranger than fiction, and I want to see if that's going to hold up today. I don't know. I don't know if the crazier stories are the real ones. We'll have to see.
I'm going to tell you right now, none of my stories are crazy. So I'm actually very interested to see how you read through, because the subject you gave me, there's some cool stuff, but for the most part, yeah.
Now
I've turned into a looks like Twitch or
you've turned into Discord settings. Bork's going to public, so we don't want anything. I'm sorry. Thank you for taking our order over chat, though. The joys of doing this on Twitch.
I'll take some
chicken tender sub.
Public tenders, please. I'll take a tender sub. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, pub sub, please. Yeah. I assumed that the category I gave you would be interesting because I saw a movie that made it seem interesting. But I guess I must be wrong. So I'm fascinated to hear where I'm wrong, but I'll go ahead and let you kick it off because last week I went first. So it's time to hear your 3 stories.
All right, now before I begin, I just want to make sure everyone knows one more key rule of the game. While I do say that, yes, there is going to be a false story, it's not going to be sort of false. It's going to be completely false.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan and we're not in the game of trying to trick each other with semantics,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a waste of everybody's time. So that one story that's a lie from beginning to end is just full of nonsense. So I want to make sure everyone knows that.
True, and we also get to ask each other one question per story. I do think we might have skipped over that.
Yeah.
So I got to be listening for what my question is. I also, given the live nature of this, I'm going to be turning off for myself chat because I don't want to give myself any sort of unfair advantage, and I don't want anybody giving away any of the answers. So I'm turning off chat for myself until Dan is done with his 3 stories and I have made my guess. Then we'll throw it out to the audience for some guesses as well. If we got enough people to take a poll in the audience.
We've always got enough people even if it's 1 or 2 people, I want to know how close.
Agreed. All right, take it away, Dan.
All right. So my subject was specifically European Midsummer or Summer Solstice Festival. Now, when I first started doing research, I forgot about that European. So I had to go back and alter, because I did find out Midsummer and Summer Solstice festivals are not unique to Europe. So there are actually famous midsummer celebrations in Iran, Brazil, China. But what's interesting about it is ultimately what has happened in Europe and the European Midsummer Festival is really the same thing as those other places, because if you really think about it, it is humans noticing, this day is kind of long.
Really long.
Am I right? Like that's really where the summer solstice came from. But then where you're giving thanks or what you think that means throughout ancient history, that's where you've got the variations. And throughout Europe, the Midsummer Festival, while it really is about the long day, a lot of it comes back to its pagan roots. And more specifically, the Scandinavian pagan roots, like the Vikings, who spread their culture very quickly. A lot of it ties back to little things that came from this culture. That's not everything, right? Not every single one of them is celebrating Norse gods, but it is fascinating because a lot of what and this, by the way, this is not a story, to clarify. This is just me giving you guys a nice intro.
Painting the picture, sure.
What you'll find with a lot of European countries now is they tend to attribute this holiday to John the Baptist. Ever since the Christian Reformation, ever since the Crusades, things like that, these festivals are still very pagan, but they still pay a lot of respect to John the Baptist, which is, I find, incredibly fascinating.
As you keep saying that, I keep thinking, Jean Baptiste, really?
John Baptiste of Stay Human.
Of Stay Human, Stephen Colbert? John the Baptist.
Yeah. John the Baptist, not John Baptist,
okay,
who I do
different
also
people
love.
Okay.
But what I want to make sure everyone knows before we begin, because as I did my research, pretty much every single one of these festivals in some way involves flowers, maypoles, and dancing at night, right? It seems like that is the key tenet to these celebrations.
Okay.
But I wanted to talk about 3 European countries that do it just a bit differently, and in a way that I think is notable, either because of its history or in its execution. So we're going to start with our good friends in Germany. This chapter, by the way, this little story. Germany, the most religious solstice. Germany's summer solstice takes place on July 2nd, for those of you who are keeping score. In Germany, the solstice shares similar traditions with other more famous midsummer festivals, which, by the way, I realized I wrote that sentence in each of my stories, so probably many times. Share similar traditions with other famous midsummer festivals, but in Germany, these traditions are not rooted solely in the pagan heritage. Although, that is not to say that Germany did not have its own pagans. It had a huge pagan culture. But the midsummer festivals became incredibly popular in the region from Germany's time as the Holy Roman Empire. More specifically, during the Western Schism and the rise of the anti-pope, The festival began as a mimicry of the Middle Age midsummer festivals that were customary in the Nordic country. The Holy Roman Emperor made the celebration a national holiday to push the validity of the Holy Roman Emperor and the anti-pope in hopes to curry favor with the other large nations of Europe, like France and like the Scandinavian nations. And they were hoping that they could get them to look to their pope instead of the pope. It was a very strange time. There were two popes. No one knew how to market that.
I've not heard of the anti-pope, so for me, I'm like that part of the story. But okay.
Anti-pope, by the way, that title does not stick for long.
Okay, got it.
But it was how it was kind of originally introduced. Those of you who have played Crusader Kings, you probably love unlocking an anti-pope. I know I did. I had the anti-pope of Ireland. Whew, that guy was fun. Anyway.
Okay.
Anyway, go back. So, while there may have been festivals that marked the solstice before, they had forever changed and become a Christian celebration that is focused on celebrating the virgin conception and acts of contrition. It is less a celebration of individuals as it is a celebration for God. So that's very different, and I know that seems small, but that is very different from the rest of Europe, where it is almost a celebration of you, and it is not a celebration about you. It is about the guy upstairs, and everything you're doing is guy upstairs.
Okay.
So while you can find some fun, like revelries and bonfires, maypoles, they're marked with a lot of now Catholic, because the anti failed. They're now marked with a lot of Catholic Church involvement and services. In Meissen, Germany, is a very good example of a religious ceremony. They have a massive 2-mile-long march that the citizens and people who want to participate go through, where they actually march 2 miles back out and into the city, and they walk all the way back up to the front door of its Gothic cathedral in town. And most of the participants are carrying wooden crosses on their shoulders, as if they are marching to crucifixion.
Okay.
Germany.
Okay. All right. Cool.
That's my first story. What questions do you have about German?
Yeah, is German okay, so did you the premise that you're proposing is that Germany's version of a Midsummer Festival is deeply religious and rooted in its Catholic history, but it's sort of
Catholic.
It's sort of irreverent, sort of anti-Catholic. Like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's Catholic reformist kind of history.
Sure.
Okay, which is not
rather. So the better way to think of it is, it's not that it's rooted in that, but rather at the time that the Holy Roman Empire was trying to prove that its pope was the best pope, they took a lot of these pagan festivals. In a lot of ways, the similar idea of, like, look at all the traditions you have for Christmas. Most of them came from your winter solstice celebrations, but they basically co-opted the summer solstice and said, this right here, this is our religious holiday. And you guys love this holiday. Come to Germany. We do it best.
Do they still celebrate today?
Holy Roman Empire. Yes, they do. But as I said, now if your city is still religious about it, it is just a Catholic typically. Germany has a predominant of the Christians in Germany is predominantly Catholic. But the festival obviously in most cities does not have like what I talked about of people marching with the crosses. That is specifically in Meissen. Hold on, I'm going to spell it because I know I'm butchering it. Meissen. Specifically in that city, it is an old tradition. So to this, as of literally this summer, as of in, I don't know how many days because I don't know what today is. In a certain amount of days on July 2nd, there will be people in Meissen, Germany who are marching through the street with a cross on their shoulder to their cathedral.
Okay. All right.
If you think that's weird, wait till we get to the third story.
Really? Okay, all right.
This is you chose the Midsummer Festival. You chose specifically European Midsummer, which is Hey, I want to know more about what Christians did to pagan traditions. That is all.
I guess that's a good point.
This is my whole shtick this time.
All right, okay.
All right. Well, now we're going to move for our second story to Russia.
Okay.
We did Russia last week, I know, but I felt really good about talking about Russia because Russia, for their solstice, celebrates what they call Ivan Kupala Day. Ivan Kupala Day. Ivan stands for John, and Kupala stands for bathing. So, John the Baptist. Anyway.
Really?
Yep. Ivan the Bathing. Okay. Oh, and in Russia, the solstice takes place on July 7th. Or at least their celebration of the solstice.
The name Ivan in Russian is just the name John?
Yes, I found that out in my research. Ivan's John.
Okay.
It makes so much more sense when you, like, all these Ivans.
All the Ivans.
Okay, yes, all these
they're all just John. Okay.
They're just Johns.
All right.
All right. Ivan Kupala Day. In Russia, the rites of this holiday are connected and intertwined with imagery of water, fertility, and auto-purification. Russian girls, as an example, will float their flowered garland down the water. On the water of rivers. I wrote that really weird. On the water of rivers, and use their movements to tell their future. Boys and girls will jump over flames of bonfires. Nude bathing is a very popular way of celebrating. The Russian Midsummer festivals even inspired... The Russian Midsummer Festival even inspired Modest Mussorgsky, I can never say his name, Mussorgsky, to create his famous Night on Bald Mountain. So the Russian Midsummer Festival was the inspiration for Night on Bald Mountain. In St. Petersburg, the White Night Festival is also predominantly connected to water. It is believed that in Russia, at this time, the evil spirits that live in the water are driven away. So the water is finally safe. And that is why people like to jump into it naked and celebrate the water. And the celebration focuses very heavily on their riverbanks, where these massive bonfires are built. More specifically, though, in Russia, the Yakut people of the Sakha Republic celebrate a celestial ceremony, Yishka. God, I feel all of these words I am butchering. So if we have any Russians in the audience, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to. Yishka, which involves tethering a horse to a pole and circle dancing around it. They also enjoy, during the summer solstice, betting on reindeer or horse racing, which would often take place after the festival. The traditions are derived from Tengrilism, the ancient sun religion, which has since been driven out by the Russian Empire, the Russian Orthodox Church, and finally the Communist Party. However, in more modern era, the summer solstice traditions have been encouraged again because I guess Russia wants to appear softer on pagans for once. They finally have said, that's fine, pagans, you're all right. But other than the focus on the water and other than that dive into fertility and auto-purification, the Russian festivals look, as you guessed it, very similar to everywhere else. Maypoles, flowered garlands, a lot of dancing, a lot of drinking. But of course, the Russian version of it, so I assume no one's happy. Russia.
Russia. Okay, all right. So, can you give me that the gist of that story in 2 sentences really quickly? Because I feel like I'm trying to.
Admittedly, I messed up in the middle of that and went 2 lines down, so I do apologize.
You're
but
good.
Ultimately, the gist of what made Russia different is that while some cultures still focus on it is that John the Baptist,
right.
For Russia, this is like a water day. This is a water holiday.
Yeah, everything was about bathing, and I wouldn't put it past Russia to have nude bathing as a part of a celebration. That doesn't feel un-Russian.
Sure. But it's the fact that if you look at if you look at even what you know from the movie you watched, it's not that water isn't involved, but it's a lot about flowers and it's the fertility aspect. Fertility is that big key. In Russia, it is about cleaning. It's about auto purification, and fertility is kind of just stapled on.
Okay.
But it is not the central focus. And then also, I really wanted to tell it because I love the idea that they do reindeer races, which I had no idea was a thing. So,
yeah, but I mean,
reindeer
I guess if they're a reindeer in Russia, what else you got going on in Russia? You know, what else are you gonna race around?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, all right. It's not unbelievable to me. And I don't know that I have a question. It seems like it was just mostly a Midsummer festival based on this. They really lean into that idea of John the Baptist. They really lean into that, like, sort of bathing new life.
Kupala?
Yeah, that new life kind of mentality, born again mentality. What is the most practiced religion in Russia today?
Well, that would be the Russian Orthodox Church, I believe. I can look that up, but if I had to guess based on what I know, it would still be Russian Orthodoxy, which, no, I was thinking of Greek Orthodoxy. I was trying to think of the symbol for their church. But, God, if you look up a picture of the Russian Orthodox priests, I know they have ridiculous hats. And
okay, is this is a tenet of Catholicism?
No.
No.
In fact, I'm sure if you said that to them, they would be very upset. And if anything, I believe Russian Orthodoxy is, and I'm just pulling it up just so I can know for sure because I don't want to be completely wrong.
Sure.
Hey, it was this cross. I was thinking of the right one. It's the one that straight line, small cross, long cross, diagonal cross at the bottom.
Okay, nice, nice.
Anyway, but I do believe that if theirs is close to anything, it's more that it is derived out of Greek Orthodox. But there's a part of me that also believes that they may have just done it their own way.
Okay.
Like, I guess every church is technically a derivative of Catholicism, isn't it?
In some way, yeah, like so far down the line for sure.
Yeah, but anyway, yes.
Okay. All right.
I don't know why I thought I'd find an answer quickly on Wikipedia. You're right.
Yeah, I don't know if countries have like their most practiced religions on that like list at the top, but don't worry. Okay, your general demeanor answering that question gave me the information I needed.
Oh, and you were watching my demeanor. You weren't paying attention to my words. I could have said anything.
Sometimes how you answer the question gives me everything that I need.
Okay.
All right. Your third story, and then I'll make my guess.
All right. My third story, I just want to put a note on the front of it. Of all of the ones I researched, this is probably the one I am most interested in going to myself. Just based on some of the variations. So we are going to Austria.
Okay.
Austria, not Australia.
Germany, Austria, and Russia is where you told your stories.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
No, it's just fascinating that those were the ones that stood out.
Well, as a note, I did almost go with the UK, but then on a technicality, seeing as they left the European Union, I didn't want to be arguing semantics.
Well, I was going to ask, aren't parts of Russia in Asia? Is what I was going to ask earlier. But
yeah, a huge chunk of it. But the governing body of Russia lives in Europe. Their eyes are mainly on.
Cool. Bonus question.
Hey, no fair.
Go me.
Austria, and this chapter is titled "The Mountain Fires of Tyrol." Theirs actually just took place 2 days ago, June 15th. So. They have already finished their summer solstice. In Austria, the Midsummer Solstice Festival took their own unique shape somewhere in the Middle Ages. While it shares some similarities with other celebrations, the uniqueness of Austria's summer solstice comes in two specific forms. First is the tradition of a spectacular procession of ships that travel down the Danube River as it flows through the wine-growing Wachau Valley, just north of Vienna. Up to 30 ships sail down the river in a line as fireworks erupt from the banks and hilltops, while bonfires blaze and the vineyards are lit up. Also, the castle ruins on the way down the river are lit up and also erupt with fireworks during a 90-minute cruise downstream. The second and more unique factor to this, I lost my place. There we go. Involves those bonfires on the mountain, because along the mountainside, torches are used to make symbols and art all over. Some celebrating Christianity, some celebrating the pagan roots of the solstice festival, large flaming hearts, murals of Jesus, shields, crosses, hammers and sickles, anything a patient person is willing to spend the time and build will blaze as fireworks light up the sky. So you can actually look up pictures and see that people line up these torches by the hundreds to create this artwork all across the mountainside, so that if you were to fly over with a helicopter, or if you were on the boat that is traveling past, you will just see this artwork. And the way I describe it, think of it like driving through a neighborhood where everyone really cared about Christmas decoration.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Where you are just looking both ways and everything is lit up in a way that you know is not natural. And one of the descriptions I found online for the bonfires on the mountain, the way they light up when the festival begins, it is very much like the symbol, the pyres they light in Lord of the Rings, as they are sending a message. Oh my God, a message between the two human cities. So you just watch as one lights, and then in the distance another big flame lights up, and as they do that, these people are scrambling to light their torches and create their artwork, because it means that the procession is on the way. And then after the procession, surprising no one, the Midsummer Festival becomes a lot about maypoles, dancing around those bonfires, jumping over those bonfires, drinking, singing, dancing. You know,
Midsummer stuff.
Potentially killing someone. I don't know. I never saw the movie.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So during the Midsummer Festival, Austria basically sets their mountains on fire, but in a controlled way.
Okay. Is there any? So they're defacing the mountain in a way. They're painting art on the side of it. Clarifying?
They're not painting. They're literally just lining up torches in a pattern.
Oh, okay. In a form of art. Okay. All right. Got it.
Yeah. So like most of them are pretty simple. Like I said, hearts or like Celtic crosses. I saw in one of the pictures.
Yeah.
But some, like there was one person who literally had out of torches built Jesus kneeling holding the cross, and it looked massive. So I have no idea how much time that had to have taken.
How far back does this go? How long have they been doing this?
So the only answer I could find on that, because I wanted to make sure I was basing it on a historical anecdote, is that it started in the Middle Ages. No one gave a specific year, because like for example, with Germany, I was able to find like 1368 was one of the first noted celebrations like that. But with Austria, all it ever said was Middle Ages. And I was like, okay, well, admittedly, because this festival is still going on, in all of these places, it's also hard to find a lot of the answers, because a lot of it is advertisements telling you to come visit during the festival.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. So it is processing time. It's time for me to verbally process which of the three stories you told me that I think is a lie. And after I make my official guess, I'm going to open chat and open the poll for chat. So, firstly, I'm going to go ahead and rule out story 3. Now, there's 2 reasons why. One would be, if that was a lie, it was almost too good that I don't want to go there. Like, I'm almost like, you either came up with the most intricate, detailed, cool festival, and to be fair, it like you said, it was the one of the 3 that sounded like tourists would want to go take part in this. So
sure.
And maybe for that reason it's a lie, because it was almost too cool, right? But it was so detailed and so intricate. The pictures you said that you could see online, which doesn't always mean it's not a lie, because that's such an easy go look it up thing. But
yeah, Google it.
But you came up with the big Jesus too fast. So like I think there was enough detail and you felt confident enough about story 3 that I'm going to rule it out. Now, stories 1 and 2, I have a reason to believe that each of those are a lie. Story 1, it just seems like you would want to, I don't know, like pin Germany on having this crazy counterculture version of a festival that is overtly religious and just way out the deep end. And
yeah, Germans are not known for going off the deep end.
That's what I'm saying, though, is it just seems too like, who could I pin this on? Germany, and like, I don't remember how long you said they've been doing that one, but either way, it feels like it's the only one that was like an FU Midsummer Festival. It was the only one that was like this is a Midsummer Festival, but we're doing it different, because we want to be different, and that feels a little weird. Now,
by the way, to clarify, 1378. I said the wrong year before. 1378.
It's a lot. Okay.
That is how long the that. Oh, sorry, no, that was the German one. Sorry, I did not know. I'll find the Austria one eventually.
No worries. So my gut said story 2 because the name Ivar is the name that was, or Ivan.
Ivan. How did you forget Ivan Kupala?
Well, Ivan Kupala being John the Baptist, and Russians going crazy and nude bathing, and it being a little too focused on John the Baptist. When you found out that Midsummer festivals had John the Baptist roots, I think you were like, what would it be like if someone just took that and was like, that's all we care about. That's the component of it that rings true to us, and we're going to make a festival based on that. So for that reason, my guess is that you made up story 2. All right. Now, really quick, that's my official guess. So I'm gonna unfurl chat here. We've got 4 viewers, so we're gonna go. Cisco Games, if you're still watching, thank you for the follow. And also, they said, I'm so confused. Jumping in at every church is a derivative of Catholicism. Great moment to hit this podcast.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, and my description of the podcast might not have popped up before you came in, but we're doing a game podcast. We've got a poll here, so let's go ahead and see if we can get this live. We're going to go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so curious what everyone else thinks. I admittedly, now that I've told my stories too, I said this to Nathan off air before. This was actually one of the harder ones for me to research, because as you look through Midsummer festivals, all the countries are basically doing the exact same thing, and for the exact same reasons. So like, I really had to look for like the differences. So I do apologize if that was not the most fascinating bit of history, but it's history, and it's good to learn regardless.
It is. All right, so there's only a few viewers, so we'll see if anybody gives a chance to tell us what their thoughts are. But I agree that if story 3 is legit, that sounds like a fascinating thing to go be a part of. Did you run across? Do we do any version of a Midsummer festival in North America?
Oh. America's got a Midsummer festival, and we call it the 4th of July.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is it's just right on time for the 4th of July, so did we just co-opt our Midsummer festival and make it about America?
Yes, basically that is what I had found. However, there are still Midsummer festivals as well, just because obviously there are pagans in America as well who do hold on to traditions that may not necessarily be theirs, but like, so for example, Alaska has notable Alaska, Arizona, California, Illinois, Michigan, Oregon, New York, Washington, and Wyoming all have so like, for example, what I mean is in Washington, seeing as that's relevant to us.
Sure.
The Seattle neighborhood of Fremont puts on a large summer solstice parade and pageant, which for many years has controversially included painted naked cyclists. So
okay. Got it. So yeah, so there's small sort of festivals in different parts of the country. Yeah, I mean, we have such regional culture in this country that it makes sense that they would be kind of spread out throughout the states.
Yeah.
We got to vote for story 2. I think that's all the votes we're going to get. So Tabbykins agrees that story 2 is the vote. Now we are 0-0, by the way, so far.
We are.
So
we're 0-0.
So let's see. Did I score the first point of the game? Here we go.
Well, here we are. So story number 2, the story of Ivan Kupala, is 100% not my fabrication.
True.
Ivan Kupala is real. That is a real thing. All of that was true. You should have stuck with your gut. Germany was a lie. However,
pin it on Germany.
However, you pinned it on Germany for the wrong reason.
All right,
because
give it to me.
The story of the anti-pope is actually true.
Oh, okay.
All of that is very real.
Well, I didn't think that was a lie. That was a part of the lie, because also the Crusader Kings thing was too real. Like, so like, I thought the generally, like, them having a festival that was super religious to this day, like that in a few days people are going to carry wooden crosses. You said that was the part where I was like, that was the moment in that story where I went, could be that one. that's a little out there. But
And you know
I
what?
let it
I
slide.
tacked that on at the end because I wanted one ridiculous thing there. But no, Germany, man, Germany, their pagans have got their Midsummer Festival on lock. Do not worry, Christianity is not knocking their pagans out. German pagans, remember, when you think about Germany, you're talking about like your famous fairy tale, right? That is your like your basic bread and butter witches in the woods
Right,
luring
right.
children into ether. Germany they're fine. Their Midsummer Festival is called Sommersonnenwende on June 20th.
So
And
it's
yeah,
coming up.
no,
It's coming up.
their experiences herefore have shown that after the old heathen use on John's Day and every year in the country, as well as towns and villages, money and wood have been gathered by young folk. They've got a whole. They're fine.
Oh my gosh.
They're fine.
All right. Well, we're still 0-0. We're gonna take a quick minute or two long break, really quickly, and then we'll be right back with some stories about elves. See you in a sec. All right, we're back. Wait, on the break, Dan was diving into his stories really quickly. What happens in what festival happens with the story you just told me?
So Nathan was talking about he was hoping to hear some of like either old dangerous things. I was like, yeah, a lot of these cultures, like the most danger they've been advertising in these sites is jumping over bonfires. But in Russia, and I omitted this from this, so they will actually have new couples, newlyweds, jump over a bonfire together, holding hands. And if they do not continue holding hands or they do not clear the fire, it is assumed that their marriage will fail. Just right then and there, it's just like, nope, that's not the one for you. Nope, that's done.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. Yeah, I was saying I wondered if there would be anything. The movie was a quite horrific representation of what a Scandinavian midsummer festival would be like, based well in the pagan roots and basically implying that some of the pagan roots and rituals of this small village, this sort of inbred village, carried through to today, and they were still practicing things like self-sacrifice and or ritualized sacrifice and that sort of thing. So it gets dark. It's not a movie I necessarily am saying I recommend watching. However,
I don't think they still do that.
Okay,
think
thank
I
God.
think they're done with
It yeah, thank God. It did stick with me though. It is a horror movie for sure. Actually, the guy's his goal was to see if he could make a horror movie in all daylight. And whew, he did it.
I mean, I've seen Wicker Man. It can be done.
It's very much it draws a lot of comparisons to Wicker Man for that reason. It's a very similar, even a similar plot, but yeah, it's dark. Okay, all right, Dan, are you ready? We're getting into some elven history here. I've got 3 stories about the history of elves that I'm so excited to share with you. And elves,
I love that it's history of
woo,
elves.
Man!
That's a sentence.
Elves run the gamut. Elves are everywhere, but elven history, not quite exactly what I thought. You know what? And my stories are going to dive into this, but just suffice to say, elves and what we picture when we think elves today, very different than what we pictured when we thought elves a few centuries ago. And even when the instances of elves sort of, the first elves in, this is all just context, okay? So the first sort of elves in common lore was Norse history. Which these are, as I talk about these things, these aren't things I'm going to dive too far into. Norse history was where the light and the dark elves were of an inhuman realm, similar to the where are the frost giants from in Thor? You know, like all that stuff. Yeah. And the dark elves are even a plot point in Thor too. But Norse history is where the term elf kind of first came to be. But then they very quickly divulged from being these sort of tall warrior creatures into being small, impish, mischievous kind of fey creatures. And that's how they were used in things like Shakespearean. Oh, that's not true. Elf was created by Tolkien, says Bork. We'll get there. Yeah. But yeah, they were sort of fey creatures, which is where Shakespeare uses elves and fairies kind of interchangeably in some of his works. They're essentially magical beings in those contexts. And then as well, there was a story of Merlin. I think the Lady of the Lake is considered an elf in Arthurian history, but Merlin fell in love with a elven woman who tried to seduce him and then kill him. So there's all of this random sort of history of elves, but no singular image of what an elf is or looks like. So what I want to do is take you through a few just sort of common elves from history, and talk about how different cultures have maybe seen those elves. Yeah, we'll just dive into it. They're kind of all over the place. So the first story I want to tell you, I called "In a Hole in the Ground Lived an Elf." Now but I spelled.
I see where this is all going.
But I spelled "hole" very specifically. No, it's not all Tolkien themed, but they're. And this isn't even the Tolkien story, actually. But I called it "In a Hole in the Ground Lived an Elf." Hole spelled very specifically. So, Dan, have you ever considered living in Iceland?
No, but I've considered traveling.
Yeah, what do you think about Iceland? Like, why would you want to go there?
Well, the first thing I always think of is I think the same thing everyone thinks of, which is Greenland's icy and Iceland's green.
Right, yeah, you have the flip in your head. You've got to remember. Yeah. But also it's beautiful. I mean, there's waterfalls and volcanoes and elves and fjords and the northern lights and elves, and there's hot springs and elves. There are elves. There's a lot of elves in Iceland, actually, Dan. Tons of elves. Actually, if you ask 2 people in Iceland, one of them will tell you there are truly, actually, believably, elves in the land. Half of Iceland's population believes in elves. They call them the Huldufolk. Huldufolk meaning hidden people. And so the story goes that biblically, Eve was embarrassed that her children were dirty when God came to visit, so she hid them away and lied about them. And then God saw through her deceitfulness and said, "What man hides from God, God will hide from man," and then hid them away, and now Iceland calls them the hidden folk, and they live in rocks. They're elves that live in large rocks in Iceland.
That seems cruel.
It was Eve's children. Yeah, super sad. So how would you, if you really truly believed in elves, Dan, how would you change maybe your daily interaction with the world? Would it change at all if you actually thought elves existed?
Guess I'd be on the lookout more frequently.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Like you're trying to stay aware because I'd love to see one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Iceland plans $1 million construction projects around maybe accidentally disturbing elven homes. So
I'll save my questions
let's
for
just
the
go
end.
for
I'm
it. Let's
sorry.
see. So the supernatural beliefs are so strong in Iceland that construction projects have been delayed to avoid disturbing homes. And if the projects aren't first stopped by the people of Iceland protecting the elves, something always seems to go wrong, almost as if the elves are stopping them. So the clearest example of this happened in the late 30s. There was construction on a road near something called Alfhol, meaning Elf Hill, but Alfhol, which is how I spelled hole in the title of my thing. The
Alfhol.
Alfhol, meaning Elf Hill. So the most famous, it was a famous elven residence in this city of Kopavagur. So the construction was supposed to bring a road straight through Alfhol, which would destroy it, and no one really campaigned to stop it, but weirdness started. So first there were money problems. They had to put the whole project on a 10-year delay because they ran out of money. A decade later, they went back to keep building the road, and then the workers started encountering all sorts of problems. So broken machinery, they would lose their tools. Things literally happened so much to the degree that they were the decision was made to reroute the road and just go around the hill rather than through it. And they were able to successfully build the hill. But then later in the 80s, they were going to repave that road. They were going to raise it and go back through Alfhol. They were going to fix it basically and make a better road in the 80s. And then when they reached Alfhol, they were about to demolish it. Their rock drill broke into pieces. And then the replacement drill broke into pieces. And then at that point, the workers were spooked and they all left and refused to go near the hill. And
I would be spooked as well. That would.
And then they literally, Icelandic laws were written in 2012 stating that all places reputed for magic or connected to folktales, customs, or national beliefs should be protected for their cultural heritage.
Huh.
And that is how Iceland believes in elves.
Now, so I guess the question I was going to ask before still stands. It's still a very similar question. Who determines that they know where elves live?
Yeah,
Who is the authority on this subject?
I don't think there's an authority as much as there is a common history of folklore. That's kind of like, it's kind of like asking who determined that this is a folklore story of this particular country, right? There just are colloquially agreed upon locations in Iceland where it's always been told that an elf lives there. It's always been told, and maybe that comes from like Elf Hill. I didn't look up a picture of it, but perhaps it was just it's a striking looking rock, right? And so like history would state that there must be an elf that lives there or something of the sort. And I can even, but yeah. So I don't think that there's an authority on this. I think it's just sort of something that the people generally agree upon. Now, I will say in the reading, it seems that oftentimes it's citizens, not necessarily the construction workers. It seems to be citizens who take up their protest mantle and say, "Don't destroy that thing. We think that it is the home of an elf, or where it has some sort of cultural heritage about elves."
Yeah, but how many people need to protest for the government to be like, "Oh well, there's 10 people there. There's probably at least one elf."
I don't know. I think it's just that when they start running into problems, they go, "It's an elf. Must be an elf."
Must be an elf. All right, pack it up. Union boss says we're leaving.
Oh, don't read too much, Dan. Don't read too much chat.
Oh my God, you're right. I shouldn't read chat at all.
I don't know. Yeah, because Bork's saying Iceland's known for its trolls, and that could be true. Maybe I'm lying.
I closed the chat. I saw something about me having a history degree, and I was like, I need to read that. What does that say? But anyway.
You're good. All right. You know what's funny is that you mentioned this next topic twice in your story separately. Yeah. How much do you know about Santa?
Oh. You mean Mr. Claus himself?
Mr. Claus himself.
Yeah, he's not my patron saint of the winter. I get the Maccabees, but I like Santa.
All right, fair enough. Well, this story is called Santa's Little Hazards. And if you...
God, that's a great title for something.
And if you were of a different religious persuasion, you might know a little bit of this history. In fact, there's probably some history about Santa that you know anyways, just from being a consumer raised in America. Which is that before... Do you actually know about the history of the version of Santa that we have now?
I will actually no. So
Oh, okay.
truthfully, I know where they took a lot of the imagery from. I know
Mhm.
where the amalgamation comes from, but I will admit I don't know much about actual Saint Nicholas and how similar that is.
Well, this might be you might know this, or this might be an interesting fact for you to learn then, because this is true. This isn't part of the story. Because before 1931, Santa was considered he was a tall, sort of gaunt man, a very skinny man. Sometimes in history, he was an elf himself. But Coca-Cola commissioned an artist to paint Santa in 1931, and he was given the jolly like red suit and the rosy cheeks and the white beard, and that is the Santa that we image today. Coke.
Stupid American consumerism. We ruin everything.
Yep. Yeah. No, literally, it's that's a thing about Santa. I don't know why I knew actually now that I say it out loud, but that is that is actually true. So what I wondered, given that the imagery of Santa that we have only goes back less than 100 years, is perhaps the image of the Christmas elf that we have similarly recent? That was the question that got me researching, and the answer turned out to be largely no. Largely, or at least not the invention of elves. Maybe the imagery I'll touch on in a second, but the existence of elves at Christmas is actually something that goes back a little further and has roots in some other Christmas traditions. So, the legend of Saint Nicholas was common around Europe as a bringer of gifts to the different villages and to the different towns of around Christmas, and everyone had maybe a different name for him. But he came the idea came to the Netherlands around like the early 18th century is when it started to sort of align with Christmas celebration and St. Nicholas. And then some locals, because the idea of St. Nicholas was gift giving, they began to use that encouragement of gift giving to encourage children to exhibit good behavior. And this is where the idea of the sort of, I guess we'd know it today as the naughty and nice list, but it was essentially a incentivization to be good so that you receive gifts. Because up until this point, again, St. Nicholas was just the bringer of gifts with no stipulation behind the receipt of the gifts.
Sometime we put morality in.
Well, Netherlands already had a history of doing that because this is where the legend of elves, or the Olfen, came to be used. So in the Netherlands, Olfen were a bit of folklore used similarly as a deterrent for ill-behaved children. They were defined as mischievous little men in the woods, known to bring treats to those who were good and steal children from their bed if they were bad. Toy makers would make small wooden figurines. You can find creepy pictures of them that are placed in children's rooms as a reminder to behave. And then I couldn't find any details as to when, but that legend soon became synonymous with the legend of Sinterklaas, essentially as a threat that if you're good, you'll get presents. If you're bad, the Olfen will steal you in the night. And then over time, the perception of elves as Santa's helpers took a less sinister turn until they were described in early 20th century book of poetry as the lovable long-eared toy makers we know and love today.
It really changes my perspective on Elf on a Shelf, because now I know he's just waiting to steal children.
That's all he's waiting to do. Yep. That's it. That's the story of the Olfen of the Netherlands.
I don't think I have a question. That was all very straightforward, and you pretty well expanded. I'm gonna save my question, and if I think of something when I'm reasoning it out later, I will use it then. I'm gonna hold my question.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So the last story, because what I wondered was, okay, so I know what elves kind of used to be like. I know what they were like in sort of Scandinavian culture, the small little impish, sort of mischievous creatures. I kind of knew about this one Icelandic thing, and some of these different sort of visions, they all felt different than what I think of an elf to be. So where did the modern high elf, the modern tall, royal, regal elf image that we have in Tolkien's books come to be? And the answer is that it basically was invented just before Tolkien used it in his books. This is a rather recent advent, but Tolkien wasn't the one who did it. About mathing 13 years before The Hobbit, a book came out in 1924 called, oh yeah, I forgot, I call this story the story of the King of Elfland's daughter. The book would, yes. The book was called The King of Elfland's Daughter in 1924, and this is where we get our modern view of elves, which inspired, we'll say, Tolkien to take elves into his stories. So considered the originative work of modern elves in fairy tale and high fantasy. It's pretty straightforward love story about a young prince who falls in love with an elf woman, brings her back to his kingdom, where she is dissatisfied and escapes back to Elfland. In the end, the King of Elfland uses a magic spell to combine the mortal and elf realms so that everyone can live happily ever after. Oh, and in Elfland, time passes slower. So there's some interesting little magic, it works differently than humans. But it is a nice story. They didn't the elf and the prince didn't hate each other. She just wanted to be with her elf kin, and he wanted to be with his human kin. So they brought the world together, and it was so nice. So unlike many stories of elves before, elves in the stories were of human height, changing the narrative from small, mischievous fae people into tall, royal, elegant cultures and kingdoms. So that book soon faded into obscurity very soon after, so not a lot of people remember it. And then The Hobbit came out in 1937, which was sort of the progenitive, popularizing of that version of an elf. But in 1977, an English band called Steel Eye Span wrote a concept album about the book. And that concept album, and it had narrative voice stylings of different voice actors doing voices from the book, one of which, being the narrator and the Elf King himself, was Christopher Lee. And it is now considered highly influential in the realm of fantasy. That was in 1977 that concept album came out.
And Christopher Lee, what a treasure he was.
I know. And that's the story of the King of Elfland's Daughter.
Do you know that Christopher Lee wanted to play Gandalf? That's who he always envisioned himself playing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was a good Saruman, though. He was a super good Saruman. Oh my gosh, he was just
excellent.
Because it's almost like the voice was just a tinge too sinister.
But you know what? He would have been a good.
He would have been.
I think it's just
he would have been good at anything he did.
Yep, it doesn't matter. That man was gold.
Agreed. Those are my stories of elves, Dan. Icelandic elves, Christmas elves, and high elves.
So my question on the third story, who was the author? I don't think you ever said an author's.
You're right. His name was Lord Dunsany.
Dasani.
No. Dunsany? Dunsany. Lord Dunsany.
Okay. Oh, all right. So, to me, right now, it feels very obvious which story is
The Lie.
The Lie. Yeah, I feel like there's only one that I'm looking at and thinking like, this was a lie. It felt the most, not necessarily fabricated, but just shallow enough that like if I just read it on the surface, I would go, oh yeah, that all made sense. But it's lacking that depth that normally really comes in Europe. So if I had to guess, I think story number 2 was a lie. I think the story about the Christmas elves was a lie. And the only reason I'm saying it is there were so many iterations of the gift bringer. Like, even I'll use the Office joke, Belschnickel, right? Like, he had Black Pete. That was like his elf in that sense. So there were so many iterations of the gift bringer that I feel like there was never just, even if the imagery has changed a little bit, this uniform idea of like, and elves make the toys. No matter who else we're talking about, there's always elves making those. And there's a part of me that feels like you reference the elf wooden figures because you were thinking of Elf on the Shelf.
Okay.
Like there's something about that I was just like, that feels like Nathan is making an Elf on the Shelf joke. And I have been fixated on that since. So
got it.
Even though realistically, it is probably the most grounded of your stories. There is something about that one that smells false. So my bet is that the second story will lie.
All right. Hold on. We'll go quick vote here. Let's just see. Can we get I need to close the prior poll really quickly. Close poll.
You mentioned Krampus. Krampus is technically a gift bringer, even though he also steals kids.
Well, this isn't the story of the gift bringer. This is the story of that particularly is the story of specifically where elves got tied to the legend of Santa. Does that make sense? So it was just like where elves first came up in the narrative of Christmas, and then not how they evolved, because how they evolved I didn't talk about, but there's like what the originative factor was that said elves and Santa are together.
I'm telling you, I think Santa and his elves, they're all Coca-Cola byproduct.
They are.
All of it.
All right, we'll give it a second here really quickly. Story 4. All right, thanks, Bork. All right, cool. Well, we don't have any votes. All right. So, story number 2, the thing that threw you off of story number 2 was the fact that I said small wooden figures stayed in home. Okay, story 1. Bork thinks story 1.
Not completely that. Okay. I should also note, story 1, I feel like I've heard that story before. If it's not from Iceland, I feel like I've heard before. So that's why story 1, I was like, that seems true. It's not just the elf thing. That just felt like knowing you as a writer, something you would throw in there so that later you could be like, oh, and those elven figures? I was just referencing Elf on the Shelf.
So then you missed that they were little men from the woods who bring children treats, which would be a Keebler elf reference. Because, yes, I threw Keebler elves and Elf on the Shelf into story number 2.
Yes, I knew it.
I was trying. I literally ran it by Tabby to be like, is it subtle enough? And there's no way to say that elf toys are in a home watching children without being like, it's Elf on a Shelf. I wanted it to be, I didn't want it to be like, you didn't pick up that it was Elf on a Shelf. I wanted it to be like, there was actually the story of the origination of Elf on a Shelf, and that's what it's based on. But yes, I tried to slip Elf on a Shelf and Keebler elves into the same story as well.
You got greedy.
I got greedy. I should have just stuck to the Keeblers.
Oh my God, does that mean I have a point?
You do. It's 0-1 now, Dan.
You gotta put a scoreboard on this screen.
I know. Next time we're gonna have a 0-1 right there. I can do it. Yep. Yes. So that is. Oh my gosh. All right. I'm gonna have to really think here now about. Wait. Can I do it? Oh, it's gonna take too long. I'm gonna have to really think about. That didn't work at all. Your story, because or your next week's topic or 2 weeks from now topic, because you have mine, and I
do have yours.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I wanna know what mine is, and then I will give you yours.
I want to pull it up because I wrote it in a very specific way. Nathan, I would love if in 2 weeks you could tell me 3 stories about the most successful examples of propaganda / yellow journalism.
Okay.
I want to know about some of the most effective propaganda campaigns and what their outcomes.
Okay. I did a project in high school, it was in high school. It was a film class, and I talked about that. I did a whole research paper on the history of propaganda in World War II, film propaganda in World War II. And that was interesting, the way that film was used as a political tool in World War II.
So it's in a way, right? Like that's why I wanted to make sure to clarify that it is most successful examples, because it could be argued that any commercial is propaganda.
Okay, all right, cool.
But I'm talking about like what ones that changed either a national opinion or changed the way the world worked. Like
cool
things, smears that were never able to be watched.
Cool. All right. I like it. Propaganda. And Dan, so I want to hear some stories, because there's a weird thing that people do. And the weird thing that people do that I can't believe happens on a daily basis is that we cut other humans open to solve problems. I think it's crazy that we, all the time, doctors are slicing people open and pulling apart flaps of skin just to fix things inside of them. So I want to know 3 stories about the history of surgery. I want to know how far back surgical procedures go. I want to know some of the craziest surgeries that were attempted and actually worked. Anything that has to do with a surgeon or doctor, doing some sort of invasive maneuver.
Yeah, I'm gonna really stick to the Mad Cats. I'm gonna stick to the people who really tried something different, and they might have failed, right? That's fine. But I want to go through those. Yeah, no, this will be. I already I see the fruit of these stories. I can make this work.
Mine's deep historical. Like I deal best with like elves and like, but like it's like no, yellow journalism. Oh, I gotta read some shit. Okay, all right.
I gave you elves for 1
I know.
week.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If my elf on a shelf reference had slipped through, man, it would have been a great reveal.
I'm so sorry I took that away.
No,
from
you
but
didn't
I'm
take away from me.
Not at all.
No, you shouldn't be. Yeah, you shouldn't be. The goal was to devise something that would slip past your radar, and it didn't, which just means I have to be sneakier.
You got to be sneakier.
Perfect.
Got to be sneaky.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you for watching and joining. We'll be back with BS in History in 2 more weeks with yellow journal propaganda surgery, surgical.
Yeah.
Surgical journal surgery. Surgialism. And another Photoshop on Instagram. All right, we will see you guys then. Have a good day.
Happy Ivan Kapala Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy Ivan Kapala Day.